Anime what ifs. They tend to be a question that a lot of people ask that leads down a very, very, very deep rabbit hole of what if certain characters survived, or what if certain person didn't make certain action during a specific moment in the show, and how would it have changed the outcome of the show in its entirety? Well, some of these are pretty easy to answer because it would be like,
what if Tanjiro was there when Muzan went and killed his family?
Well, Tanjiro would have died too, because he didn't have a sword, he didn't have access to any breathing techniques, and let's be real, he wasn't the fittest individual at that point. But some of these what ifs can lead down a deeper rabbit hole and kind of add more to the story or take away a lot from the story depending on what these what if questions were. So today, I'm going to be answering some of the what if questions I received on one of the other platforms that I do stream on quite a bit, and see if I can break them down enough to give you guys an answer that would be satisfactory to you guys. I don't know why I struggle to say that. We're just going to get straight into it. Now, a lot of the questions that I asked on this video were a lot of rinse repeat questions. So I'm going to get one of them out of the way now, which is impossible to answer, which is, what would happen if Asta didn't have Libe? Or what would happen if Asta, what other kind of magic would Asta have had if not anti-magic? This question is legitimately impossible to answer because we cannot determine what kind of magic someone would have out of every other magic in that universe if we didn't know what they had originally. Asta was born with no magic. He got anti-magic from Libe, therefore his only source of magic would have been from Libe. It is legitimately impossible to answer a question of what kind of magic would Asta have had if he had magic, because I could say he would have atomic magic, the ability to control atoms, and realistically that is an answer that is like a sound answer because it's just a magic type he could have. There is a huge plethora or like a multitude of thousands of kinds of magic in the Black Cloververse that Asta could have had access to, but we will never know because he has anti-magic. It's one of the questions where it's like, what type of magic, if the question is, what type of magic do I think Asta would have had? Just like as a, what would I have wanted him to have? Honestly, something that benefits strength, something along those lines. But obviously, it's all up to what you think he would have had, because it's an opinionated question and I don't know how to answer it and give a satisfying answer without just giving my opinion rather than what I think could be truthful. Another one that was really weird for me to try and answer was, what if Tanjiro wasn't delayed getting back to his house at the beginning of the series? Or what if Tanjiro got back to his house? Or what if he never left? And this question is very simple to answer. He would have died. There is no question about it. Tanjiro at this point had no breathing forms, wasn't necessarily the most fit of individuals. He had good reflexes and good intelligence, but this is Muzan Kibutsuji. I believe that's the person who kills Nezuko at least. This is Muzan, the demon. There was not going to be a competition or a boxing match between Tanjiro and Muzan. Tanjiro would have gotten his ass clapped at that point because no weapon, the best weapon Tanjiro had at his disposal at that time in the house was a hatchet. Giyu, at this point, arguably one of the weaker Hashiras, just has a better defense, was able to, wasn't trying against Tanjiro and was still able to dog walk him. What do you think the strongest demon we have had would have done to Tanjiro? This isn't a question I can answer and give a satisfying answer to because it is just he would have died. The series wouldn't have gone forward. If you're on about what would be the repercussions of that, that's a different question. And I believe that is a question that I can answer later on. But right now, that's not really on the cards. That's not on the table. But now we're going to start getting into the nitty and gritty questions. One of them is, what if Ace survived Marineford? Now, obviously, I haven't seen One Piece past Alabasta. I'm probably going to get around to it at some point, but I don't have the full extent of the series' knowledge behind me. I have clips, I've seen creators' videos about this, I've seen a bunch of wiki threads and Reddit posts. but I'm going to give my interpretation of what I think could happen if Ace survived Marineford. Firstly, I think Luffy would be nowhere near as strong as he is now. This is not to say he couldn't achieve Gear 5 at some point later, much later down the line, but the motivation for Luffy training with Rayleigh, or Luffy training for the time skip, was the fact that he was so depressed that Ace had passed that he had nothing else he couldn't do anything else except get stronger from that point. He had nothing, sort of no one backing him up at that point, no one holding him, sort of holding his hand. It was just Luffy and the thoughts in his head. So I don't think Luffy would have gone through the training he did during the time skip, and I don't think he'd been anywhere near as strong as he is now, which might have led on to future fights being lost more brutally, like the Kakaguri fight, like the Kaido fight, like a bunch of these fights. I don't think Luffy would have won half of these fights, or even had the fights be as close as they were, if he didn't trade for the time skip, which he wouldn't have done if Ace lived. Because it's just a storytelling thing where it's like you need a character to go through some traumatic experiences to then realize that they need to get stronger so they don't have that happen again. And that's just one of the things that happened with Luffy, and I think it was much needed. Now, obviously, again, if Ace did survive Marineford, Luffy wouldn't have had that traumatic experience, wouldn't have trained as hard or possibly at all, wouldn't have gotten to the level of strength he was post time skip, and therefore wouldn't have been able to compete with half the fights he ended up going into. Obviously, again, this is just for me as an outside person, not fully watching One Piece, but just glancing in at the series through clips, Reddit posts, and threads. So if I am fully wrong with this, let me know, and let me know what you think the what if could be answered with. But this is just going to be my own interpretation of it. Now, throughout this video, I did get a lot of Jujutsu Kaisen questions, but there was a couple that really stood out to me, so I'm going to try and answer them more. If I didn't get around to answering your question, I apologize, but this is just ones that I think I could answer and also give a satisfying answer to, and they actually went into a little bit of detail. One of them was, what if Gojo and Sukuna swapped where they were in the story? So if Sukuna was in Gojo's position with Sukuna's powers, and then Gojo was in Sukuna's position with Gojo's powers. So what if Sukuna, with Malevolent Shrine and Dismantle and Cleave and Fuga and all that, was the strongest sorcerer of today as a teacher of Jujutsu Tech? And what if Gojo was a cursed sorcerer that could swap bodies by people eating his fingers and also had the 6 eyes and Limitless? Now, this question has one or two complications to it, but I'm going to do 2 what if scenarios. So the first one is, are we taking into account that Sukuna no longer has the 4 arms then? Because if that's the case and we're giving that to Gojo, then that changes this answer very drastically. If we're not taking that, we're taking as Sukuna still has the 4 arms with the 20 fingers and Gojo only has 2 arms, 10 fingers, then this answer becomes a lot simpler to answer. And in honesty, if we got up to Shibuya incident and everything remained the same, Gojo would beat Sukuna. In this situation, Gojo would beat Sukuna if we're taking into account that Gojo only has 2 hands and Sukuna has 4, it would be a lot closer of a fight. But if we're taking into account that Gojo has 4 hands, Sukuna only has 2, this is an absolute cakewalk. And let me explain why. In the final arc, during the, I can't remember the name of the arc, but during when Gojo and Sukuna fight, Sukuna has a win condition against Gojo. And that win condition, ladies and gentlemen, say it with me now, is Maharaga. Maharaga is Sukuna's win condition due to the fact that he could not perceive how to cut through infinity without Maharaga. He had the ability to, but he couldn't perceive it himself. He had to get Maharaga to show him how to then do it. And the only way he was able to get Maharaga to show him how was by occupying Megumi's body and having the wheel over his head. Now, if Sukuna is where Gojo was and he can't bounce through bodies, then that means Sukuna would not have access to Maharaga as a Shinigami. This would also mean that if we're going to Gojo's following Sukuna's story to the dot, Gojo would have 6 eyes, Limitless, red, blue, purple, and the 10 shadows, including Maharaga. Do you understand how ridiculous of a fight that is? Gojo was keeping up with Sukuna with the equivalent of 20 fingers and 2 Shinigami, one of which was a bunch of Shinigami fused together. Is it Shinigami or Shikigami? Am I getting this mixed up? With a bunch of the shadows fused together as one, and the strongest shadow and Sukuna against Gojo, and Gojo was still able to keep up. So if you swap those tables around, Gojo keeps his curse abilities, which are his biggest win condition, and Sukuna doesn't get Maharaga. Sukuna has no way of cutting through infinity, which is, again, the biggest problem with Gojo's arsenal is his infinity. Now you could argue domain expansions, and if we're giving Sukuna access to 4 hands, domain expansion goes a lot further because he can use his domain, which means Gojo has to keep up a hollow wicker basket or something along those lines and still box Sukuna. And Sukuna has 2 hands to be able to do that. But I don't think the fight would ever reach a domain expansion. I think Gojo would straight up pull out Maharaga and they would proceed to clap Sukuna together. Now, obviously the what ifs are, does Sukuna get his 4 hands? Because if so, he lasts a lot longer during this fight, but nowhere near, he is not winning this fight. If we're giving Sukuna 2 hands, he is there. The fight is barely getting past like a minute. And that is just because even if we're taking Sukuna in Ishidori's body, okay? The main problem is Sukuna has such cursed energy refinement, but he is still working off of Yuji's cursed energy limit because he doesn't have all of his fingers, and it is not his body, it's Yuji's body he's occupying. With 6 Eyes of Limitless, Gojo is constantly able to take a percentage of off of the cursed energy limit, so he will never hit 0. So he doesn't have to worry about blowing his cursed energy away. And plus, he just gets it all back. If we're following the story of Sukuna versus Gojo, Shinjuku showdown, Gojo is wiping everyone, little to no difficulty, because no one has a way past the Limitless, apart from Maki, who would have been able to get past it if she had the inverted Spear of Heaven. Unfortunately, we never saw them use it in the Shinjuku showdown. We only saw the Soul Split Katana, so I don't think anyone could really get past infinity. So yeah, Gojo would dog walk the verse if those 2 swap places. Now this one that I'm about to read out wasn't asked a lot, but the one time it was asked, I really enjoyed how the question was phrased, because I also heavily agree with this point, which is, what if Kaguya from Naruto wasn't the final villain, but was Madara instead? I think it would be interesting to see that ending. The reason I agree with this so much is because I think OG Naruto is 10 times better than Shippuden, and I despise the fact that they introduced the Kaguya clan in the end of Naruto Shippuden by doing Madara dirty. That is my main complaint about Shippuden. Obviously, the filler is a little annoying at times. Some of the characters just get forgotten, which is also a little disappointing looking at you, 1010. But my main complaint is just that they introduce Madara they introduce Kaguya by killing off one of the most hyped ninja of all time and bringing in Kaguya, which I just felt like did Madara so dirty. And I didn't like that, because they had him have such cool moments. Him versus the Shinobi Alliance, him pulling up on the 5 Kage and being like, do you want my clones to have Susanoo as well or nah? Dropping a second meteor on the Shinobi Alliance. Everything about this man was built up to be such a menace. And then the fact that Kaguya, like Black Zetsu, just assassinates him from behind, and Kaguya comes out of that and it's like, oh, you thought this was the final villain, but wait, we go even further. We go into another set of puppet strings. It just, Naruto Shippuden really lost me for that, and I didn't enjoy it. So if Madara was the final villain, I would have enjoyed the story a lot more. If they introduced the Kaguya clan in Boruto, sure. At that point, it's fine, because that's Boruto now becomes an alien-focused thing. Or even if the first of the Kaguya clan was introduced in the Naruto the Naruto at the end, the last end, whatever that movie was where they got married. If they introduced the Kaguya clan then, I wouldn't have as much of an issue because it's that setting up for Boruto. But the fact that they introduced it in the last arc, which, let's be real, the fourth Great Shinobi War was possibly the worst arc in Naruto. And the fact that they did it and I just didn't like the disrespect they put on Madara. That was my main issue. I felt like he was such a menace from when he was introduced up until the point of death, and the death just felt like it made him feel like such a bitch. I'm sorry, but that's how I genuinely feel. So if Madara was the final villain, I think Naruto Shippuden would have been such a better ending. It might not have impacted with the Naruto vs Sasuke fight at the end of Shippuden as much because they wouldn't have the powers of the they would have Hagoromo's split powers, but I feel like it still would have been a lot better of a conclusion for the fourth Great Shinobi War. Let me know what you think about that. That's going to be some of the main answers I give, because a lot of the questions that you guys gave, I couldn't find a satisfying answer to give you that wasn't stupidly basic. One of the main ones I saw was, what if all the main characters dies at the start? Then guess what? The show probably doesn't happen. One of the other ones I saw was, what if Yoriichi became a demon? Well, then the entire verse is fucked because you have a demon that can use sun breathing. And possibly all other forms of breathings derived from that, since he was such a prodigy. What if Midoriya never got a quirk? Well, then most of the story of UA doesn't happen, because if whoever All Might gave his powers to at the end, unless if it gave it to Mirio or Bakugo or whoever, they would have lost it or died within 5 years, because that is the curse of One for All, where if you have a quirk, you will not live long enough to use One for All to its full extent. It is almost like the Titan shifters from Attack on Titan. One of the other ones I saw was, what if Sasuke kills Naruto in their final battle? Then Boruto wouldn't exist. It's very simple answers that I can't really expand upon because of how limited information we have on what would happen if X and Z didn't happen. Because if Naruto died, then Kurama probably would have remanifested in someone else. Naruto wouldn't have been Hokage. Boruto would have never happened. So we can, at that point, I might as well just write a completely different story. I'm not doing this off a script. This is purely my knowledge of anime. And a lot of these come down to, if these two things, if this situation didn't happen, it would have been a completely different story and entirely speculation. At least if it's something like, what if Gojo and Sukuna swap places, I can be like, okay, we have this story from beginning to end. If I swap their places, I just have to see how those two characters would interact in those situations, which I can do based off my experience of reading JJK. But if it's something like, what type of magic would Asta have if it's not anti-magic? That's entirely speculation, because there is no indication that Asta would have ever had magic if he didn't have anti-magic. So I can just say he would have particle manipulation, which might be true. It might not be. We don't know, because it would never happen. And also, there was a couple of here I couldn't answer just because I haven't seen enough of the anime. I haven't watched the anime fully yet, or I haven't done enough research. One of the main ones was, what if Jotaro joined the Part 5 gang with Koichi in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? I don't know, because I'm only getting onto Part 5 now. So if you, or like, what if Ichigo had access to all of his powers at the beginning of the series? I can't answer that, because realistically, I haven't seen enough of Bleach to make a fair assumption. I would ask other creators this, and I probably will do so, but a lot of these come down to, I haven't seen the anime, I haven't done enough research on it, or it is a very simple question that doesn't have a satisfying conclusion. So that is a lot of the answers I'm going to be giving, but I will be trying to do a part 2 of this and possibly make it into a series. I will be asking for more what ifs at a later date, and as always, be sure to drop us to subscribe if you actually like this kind of stuff. If you do, please tell me what you like about this. If it's my personality, then I hate to break it to you, you're grasping at straws here. I do go live on the Clock app every day, so be sure to come down there. It should be around 7 p.m. GMT. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you all whenever I record next. And peace out.